Hello there, this is Race to Power on WION World is One. I'm Eric Njoka. Welcome to the show. Tonight, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says he expects US President Donald Trump to respect Canadian sovereignty following reports that Alberta separatists met with US officials numerous times. The Prime Minister says that Trump has never brought up the issue of Alberta independence during their meetings. And in Africa, passenger flights between Ethiopia's capital Addis Ababa and cities in the northern Tigray region have been cancelled amid fears of a return to conflict, with reports of clashes in one area. We'll begin with the United States. Is the US seeking to tear Canada apart? Fresh reports indicate that Canadian separatists have been meeting American officials. They are seeking money from Washington to help fund a breakaway nation. And these reports have alarmed Ottawa, which is already dealing with increasing pressure from Trump. A report in the Financial Times says that the leaders of a Canadian separatist called the Alberta Prosperity Project have been holding meetings with senior US officials. The separatists have met Trump administration officials 3 times since April last year, and they plan to meet again in February this year. The Canadian separatists want to sit down with US state and treasury officials next month. Their goal is to try and get a $500 billion credit facility from the US. They want to use this credit line to bankroll Alberta if it decides to cede or to secede from Canada. This is Alberta. It's Canada's 4th largest province by area and the 4th most populated. It's home to about 5 million people, but what makes Alberta special is that it's Canada's leading oil producer. The Alberta Prosperity Project wants to hold a referendum. They want Albertans to vote on whether to remain in Canada or become a separate sovereign nation. The separatists are currently trying to gather 178,000 signatures in a petition which would force Alberta to hold a vote. If they were to secure a funding commitment from the US, it may convince more Albertans that secession is actually viable. Alberta has had a small separatist movement since the 1930s. The movement has seen periods of traction and decline through the decades. But it has not held a referendum so far. Only Canada's French-speaking Quebec province has held secession referendums in the past, in 1980 and 1995. Quebec's separatists lost both times, but reports say the Albertan separatists have reached out to the leaders of the Quebec referendum to learn from their mistakes. This is because they believe that the time is ripe to get Alberta to secede from Canada. The latest boost for Alberta's separatist movement came after the 2025 general election with the victory of Prime Minister Mark Carney and the Liberal Party. Alberta has been a conservative bastion for years, and the Liberal Party, extending its 10 years in power, brought renewed calls for Alberta to chart its own course. The separatist group, the Alberta Prosperity Project, reportedly met US officials for the first time in April 2025. That's the month of the general election, when the Liberal Party returned to power. The separatists plan to meet American officials again in February, just days after the latest tensions between Trump and Carney. Remember, Trump recently threatened Canada with 100% tariffs if it signs a trade agreement with China. Also on Thursday, he threatened a separate 50% tariff on Canadian aircraft. Carney drew Trump's ire during the World Economic Forum in Davos. Carney made global headlines for his speech at the summit, where he indirectly blamed Trump for the end of the post-World War II global order.
The pressure, and we are.
He has been facing regular threats from Trump ever since. Carney was asked about the Alberta separatist meeting US officials, and this was his response.
We expect the U.S. administration to respect Canadian sovereignty. I'm always clear in my conversation with President Trump to that effect, and then move on to what we can do together.
I'd like to ask, in those conversations, has he ever raised the prospect of Alberta or Quebec separation?
No.
So far, reports indicate that the U.S. is not planning to bankroll the Albertan separatists. However, last week, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent hinted that he was supporting the referendum initiative. He said Albertans are very independent people and that they wanted what the U.S. has. Will this seemingly tacit support turn into a real financial commitment, or is it just a way for the Trump administration to play Canadians against each other? Mr. Dean Baxendale is a publisher and global columnist, Sunday Guardian, political and also policy analyst. He is now joining us live on this broadcast. Mr. Baxland, it's good to see you. Thank you very much for your time and welcome to the broadcast. What do you think Albertans really want right now, and why are they talking to U.S. officials?
Well, I think this is a small group of separatists that have always been part of Alberta's makeup. Currently, the polling suggests that there's 19% support for Alberta separation from Canada. I think what Albertans overall are looking for is to ensure that Mark Carney and the Liberal government builds out a program, economic program for energy that benefits all of Albertans and also benefits Canadians. That includes a new pipeline to go east to west to the west coast to bring bitumen and other products to Tidewater so that we can export those to India, who I hope that we are currently, this week, there were some announcements on that with our foreign minister on energy, so our energy minister, and India is a natural market that we need to expand. So Albertans are looking for prosperity. They're looking for a vision for Canada. I think Mark Carney, as Prime Minister, is doing the best he possibly can, given how Donald Trump is approaching this negotiation. And that is not with the kind of negotiating tactics that we've seen in the past. And he is absolutely aiming to separate and divide Canadians, and I think the Prime Minister is standing up to him.
So what happens next for Alberta? Because we understand that the separatists have been holding meetings not only with the United States officials, but also with Quebec referendum officials. They want a referendum just like Quebec. Do you think that is feasible? Do you think that is possible?
I think that's going to be up to Albertans. The current Premier Daniel Smith does not support this strategy at all. Having, working with Quebec separatists, I was involved with the Save Canada or Say No and Say Yes to Canada in the last referendum in '95. I think that Canadians will once again come together and fight these kinds of separatist notions for both Quebec and for Alberta. But again, it's a free and democratic country, and we allow those to operate within our democracy, free speech. But I think ultimately that when push comes to shove, both Albertans and Quebecers will reject the notion of separating from Canada. We're stronger, unified, and also working with the United States on a continental security and economic pact that will ultimately make us a fortress in the long run and actually safeguard us against China, and working ultimately to try to build partnerships with ASEAN and India, as the Prime Minister has so spoken in the last few days.
Mr. Dean Baxendale, it's good to see you. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you. Cheers.
For decades, America has prided itself as a dominant superpower, but today, many Americans are no longer so sure. A new study suggests the U.S. increasingly believes China's rise is not a distant possibility. They think it is an approaching reality. Nearly 3/4 of Americans expect China to overtake the United States when it comes to global power and influence, and almost half think it has already happened or will happen within the next 5 years. The findings refer to a poll of 1,500 adults conducted by the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, a Washington-based think tank. Some 47% of respondents said China has already surpassed the United States or is on the brink of doing so, Another 27% believe the shift is inevitable. Just farther down the road, only 1 in 4 Americans say China will never catch up. When asked where China holds the upper hand, Americans' first option was technology. Nearly 2/3 of respondents said China outperforms the United States in tech. It was a rare point of agreement across party lines shared by Democrats, Independents, and Republicans alike. China's economic strength also looms large in the public imagination. More than 4 in 10 respondents said Beijing has an economic advantage. Survey showed older Americans are far more likely to see China's ascent as a threat. More than half of those aged between 65 and over said their lives would worsen if China overtook the United States. Among Americans aged 18 to 29, barely a quarter felt the same. Overall, 62% said their lives would not get worse if China became more powerful than the United States. The results show a United States adjusting its view of its place in the world. Americans still value global leadership, but are accepting more competition and the chance of being overtaken.
He's a very tough negotiator. That's not good.
The U.S. seems to have scored a major victory against China in the Latin American nation of Panama. Panama's Supreme Court has ruled that 2 ports operated by a Hong Kong-based company were given contracts unconstitutionally. These are the same ports that U.S. President Donald Trump had denounced last year. This is one of the Chinese-operated ports in question, the port of Balboa on the Pacific side of the Panama Canal. It's run by the Panama Ports Company, which is a subsidiary of the Hong Kong-based firm C.K. Hutchinson. This firm has operated the port of Balboa and Cristobal Port on the Atlantic side of the canal since 1997. But after returning to power last year, President Trump said that China was using the 2 ports to control the Panama Canal. The U.S. used this as a pretext to pressure Panama. Trump said that the U.S. had given the canal to Panama, not China, and he threatened to take the canal back. In the months since Trump's threat, Panama has held multiple discussions with the U.S., and the Latin American nation has been tightening the screws on the Chinese port owners. Last April, Panama accused the Chinese firm of not paying its dues. Panama said the Chinese firm owed $1.2 billion in taxes between 1997 and 2021. The Hong Kong-based company denied the allegations, but its billionaire owner, Li Ka-shing, decided to exit the port venture. By March, C.K. Hutchinson announced a deal to sell dozens of its ports, including the 2 in Panama, to a consortium led by the American investment company BlackRock. The deal was valued at close to $23 billion, but it was stalled, reportedly due to objections by the Chinese government. And now, the latest ruling by Panama Supreme Court is a fresh blow to C.K. Hutchinson and to China's ambitions in Panama. Beijing has issued this statement.
I believe you have noticed that the company in question had issued a statement immediately, stating that the ruling is contrary to the laws under which Panama approved the relevant franchise rights, and that the company reserves all rights, including the right to pursue legal proceedings. The Chinese side will take all necessary measures to resolutely safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese companies.
Despite the defiant tone, China has been facing multiple setbacks in Panama since Trump's return to power. And it's not just Panama. Trump has brought America's old Monroe Doctrine back to the forefront. He has insisted on re-establishing U.S. hegemony all across the Western Hemisphere. And for now, his plan is working at China's expense. Let's see how Xi Jinping responds.
tough negotiator. That's not good.
India has handed over the second tranche of election-related assistance to Nepal. Nepal is preparing for parliamentary polls scheduled for March 5th. According to a statement by Indian Embassy in Kathmandu, the assistance was formally transferred in the presence of Nepal's Finance Minister Rameshwar Prasad Kanal and Acting Chief Election Commissioner Ram Prasad Bandari at an event held at Nepal's Ministry of Finance. The election aid includes over 250 SUVs and double cab pickups. The first tranche of such assistance was delivered on January 20th. Further deliveries are expected to take place in batches in the coming weeks. These supplies form part of the support requested by the government of Nepal to facilitate logistical preparations for the upcoming elections, particularly in geographically challenging regions where transportation remains a key constraint. Indian officials say the continued assistance reflects the partnership between the two neighbors and underscores the deep mutual trust and friendship between the people of India and Nepal. These are the first general elections in Nepal since the Gen Z protest ousted the KP Sharma Oli government last year. And for more details, our correspondent Saloni Murarka has sent us this report from Kathmandu.
As election campaigning picks up pace in Nepal, India has extended its support to poll process. New Delhi has handed over its second batch of election-related assistance, including over 250 vehicles. India has been supporting Nepal's elections since 2008. And this support follows a request by the government of Nepal due to the difficult and remote areas where transportation has remained a challenge. However, concerns remain in high-altitude mountain districts. Due to the heavy snowfall, local leaders have now warned that if the weather conditions do not improve, thousands of voters may not be able to cast their votes. Meanwhile, officials say that this support by India will help the Election Commission's logistical capacity, will help the personnel and the materials to be transported and ensure a smoother polling running during the elections, especially in the difficult terrain areas. I'm Saloni Murarka reporting for WION from Kathmandu, Nepal.
Parties are huddling and campaigning ahead of the Tamil Nadu Assembly polls amid the seat-sharing tussle between Congress and DMK. Congress Party has received another invite to boost its presence in the state. Congress received an alliance invitation to join hands with actor Vijay and his Tamilaga Vetri Kazagam, or the TVK. The invitation came from Vijay's father, S.A. Chandrasekhar, who claimed that TVK is considering an offer of support and urged the National Party to accept it. Neither the TVK nor Vijay have confirmed or denied the invitation. However, Congress has responded. The party's state chief, K. Selva Peruntagai, dismissed the offer, declaring the cadre needed no boost from Vijay. He added, and I quote, "Rahul Gandhi is giving us the boost, Horlicks and Bonvita we need." In a tight-roped electoral battle that will take place in 2 months, Congress in its alliance will have DMK, which is looking for more than 25 out of 234 assembly seats it had in the last elections. Whether or not the two will come to a common consensus remains to be seen. Let's move to Africa now. Ethiopia has suspended flights to Tigray region in the wake of clashes between federal and regional forces. Flights to the volatile region are operated by Ethiopian Airlines, which is the fully state-owned carrier and the only airline serving the northern region. According to reports, clashes broke out in the disputed western Tigray earlier this week between the regional and national forces in an area claimed by Amhara and Eritrea. These forces have refused to withdraw from the region, despite a peace agreement signed in 2022 requiring them to do so.
Today, many families have been told that there are no flights for a reason that is not clear to us, and people are suffering due to cancellations. In addition, the people of Tigray, including those in Mekelle, are suffering as they can't access their own savings properly because of the long queues and the limit of ETB 2000.
I came here and queued because I heard there was no cash in the other branches. They gave me only ETB 2000. I was in the queue from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and I received only 2000 ETB and am going back home.
The renewed tension has raised fears of renewed conflict. A brutal war between Ethiopian federal forces and the Tigray People's Liberation Front around 3 years ago killed at least 600,000 people and displaced thousands of others between November 2020 and November 2022. Niger has deployed heavy security in the capital after gunfire and explosions around its main airport. The country's military ruler has accused France, Benin and Ivory Coast of sponsoring the attack. Gunfire and loud explosions echoed around Niger's international airport in Niamey shortly before midnight on Wednesday. Security sources described it as a terrorist attack. State TV reported that one of the several assailants killed was a French national, as footage showed several bloodied bodies on the ground, but it provided no evidence. Satellite photographs showed the area before and after the incident. Security sources said a store of uranium currently held at the airport had not been affected by the attack. ASCII Airlines said 2 of its aircraft sustained minor damage during the incident while parked on the tarmac, while Ivory Coast's national airline said an Airbus plane was hit.
Early this morning, the airbase, or more broadly, the Diori Hamani International Airport, was the target of an infiltration attempt by mercenaries, remote-controlled mercenaries. This is an opportunity for us to make contact with all the defense and security forces, as well as our Russian partners, for their prompt reaction. A reaction that allowed the enemy to be completely routed within 20 minutes. Some were neutralized on the spot, others were neutralized in their panicked rout.
Chiani accused French President Emmanuel Macron, Benin's Patrice Talon, and Ivory Coast President Alassane Ouattara by name while speaking on Niger's state TV after visiting the airbase, vowing retaliation.
We remind the sponsors of these mercenaries, notably French President Emmanuel Macron, Benin President Patrice Talon, Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara. We have listened to them bark enough. They should also prepare to hear us roar.
Chiani also thanked the Russian troops stationed at the base for defending their sector. Since seizing power, Chiani has cut ties with Western powers and turned to Moscow for military support. The West African nation, like Mali and Burkina Faso, has struggled to contain attacks from jihadist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State, which have killed thousands and displaced millions in the 3 nations. Burkina Faso has officially dissolved all political parties. The military junta-run country issued a decree to this effect on Thursday. This is the latest crackdown on political activity in the West Africa's coup belt. The decree banning political parties was adopted during a cabinet meeting chaired by Burkina Faso's junta chief, Ibrahim Traoré. The junta says that political parties were promoting division among citizens and weakening Burkina Faso's social fabric. The country's political parties had already been banned from holding public gatherings. Their activities have been suspended since the coup in 2022, but the parties themselves had not been officially banned until now. Before the coup, Burkina Faso had more than 100 political parties. 15 of them were represented in the country's parliament after the 2020 general election, but all of them will be dissolved now and their assets will be transferred to the state. After the coup, Traoré and the junta had promised to hold elections by July 1st, 2024, but just months before the deadline, the junta announced that it would extend its rule by another 5 years. They justified this by citing instability caused by Islamist insurgency wreaking havoc across West Africa. With the dissolving of its political parties, the junta's grip on power grows stronger and a return to democracy seems even farther away. And that's the latest on Race to Power. Thank you very much for watching. Do stay with us. This is WION The World is One.
Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. To some, it's an extreme ideology. To others, it's the very soul of India. To some, it's rebellion. To others, it's a principle of nation building. Coming soon to challenge perceptions in RSS Centenary Year, Kesariya at 100.
WION, India's global voice. The channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. We use the traditions of centuries-old natural science from India, yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy in personalized programs that help you take charge of your own health. A minimum 5-day stay is recommended for best results. Book now at yowon.com.
WION, India's global voice. The channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
What does the budget really mean for you?
From taxes to growth and jobs to inflation.
Your money, your business, your future. Join us as we decode with expert analysis
and the ground impact. No jargon, no noise, only clear answers.
Watch India Budget 2026 on WION World is One.
Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. We are live on WION World is One. We are glad you're watching. Time now for Fine Print. American Joker, let's begin with the headlines. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says that his country's missile and defense capabilities will never be on the negotiating table. This as US President Donald Trump appears to cool on threats of a strike after a military build-up in that region. A US Navy destroyer docks at Israel's Red Sea port of Eilat. Israel says the ship's arrival is routine. This comes at a time of heightened tensions between Iran and the US in the region. Press Secretary of the Russian President Dmitry Peskov says the format of a new round of trilateral talks between Russia, the US and Ukraine in Abu Dhabi is still under negotiation. This as the three sides are set to meet on February 1st. Russia's defense ministry shares drone footage of soldiers holding up Russian flags in Tanuvate, a village in Ukraine's southeastern Zaporizhzhia region that Moscow says its forces recently captured. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says it will be foolish for Britain not to engage with China, rejecting an assertion from US President Donald Trump that it is dangerous to get into business with Beijing. Turkey deploys F-16 fighter jets to Somalia as Ankara seeks to expand its military footprint in the Horn of Africa. The deployment follows Turkey's condemnation of Israel's recognition of Somaliland. The death toll from a landslide in Indonesia rises to 44. This as authorities extend recovery efforts by a week to search for those still missing. Twenty-four-time Grand Slam champion Novak Djokovic rolls back the years to book his spot in Sunday's Australian Open.